Wake me up, some breathing evidence, it's time to leave. All right, so this is going to be the great controversy of theological study in the book of Judges. And this is called a chiastic structure. So you have, let's see, basically it's a literary technique, and it presents a concept and it repeats it in reverse order. You could call it like a poetic device, and it uses a certain kind of repetition to clarify a teaching because of the way it parallels. You can see on the screen how it works. It can come in various forms. It could be like something short, like a single phrase, or the ordering of a complex idea. So it can stretch verses to chapters and even more, over a whole book even. And it's a pattern that's intentional by the author. So you present a concept in an ascending order, and then sometimes it'll have a pivoting, so that doesn't have a parallel to it. So that would be like your subject purpose, and then you would go in reverse order. But sometimes it has dual parallels at the middle, and then it does it in reverse order. And then you can, when you identify this, it helps clarify what's being taught. It's kind of a way of making it certain. So through the paradigm of the great controversy idea, which doesn't have to be an Adventist idea, and Adventists didn't invent this sort of theodicy, which I'll get into in a second. But I'm going to look at the book of Judges, and I just want to mention this chiastic. Judges has a chiastic form pretty much through the whole book, and it looks like this. And you can see the chapters and verses there. And you see this pattern that pivots on the Gideon narrative. And so the A and A would match each other and be bookends to the book. So we're going to look at that look at the characters through the book of Judges, and then talk about the theme that's going on in the book, what it's demonstrating about in the plan of salvation. So let's see. I guess I'll leave that on the screen. So this is going to be Theodicy and the Great Controversy, Chapter 1, Doing Right in Their Own Eyes, the Great Controversy in the Book of Judges. The Great Controversy theme in many ways defines the Seventh-day Adventist worldview. In broad strokes, it describes the struggle between good and evil, which is seen in Scripture in various sub-themes, primarily the attempts of the powers of evil to obliterate both the created order and the true worshipers of Yahweh. It is also seen in the mandate first given to Adam and Eve to care for and tend the created order in a garden, and is later expanded to God's followers to extend the borders of his kingdom, mostly in the face of insurmountable obstacles. Success in those battles has been, for the most part, accomplished through insignificant and weaker members of society. The youngest brother, or a social outcast like Jacob, Joseph, David, Rahab, Ruth. Christ's earthly ministry highlights yet more sub-themes when he reenacts the original temptation scene and comes out victorious. When he demonstrates his authority over nature, when he's stilling the storms or curing disease, and his assurance of the eventual routing of evil and the complete restoration of a broken planet when the meek inherit the earth. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, Matthew 5:5. So chaos in the book of Judges. The Great Controversy theme saturates the book of Judges. The context of the times is portrayed as chaotic, with every person acting in accordance with their own ethics. So the themes undergirding the book are earthy and confrontational. The history of Israel at the time becomes a sad but predictable cyclic pattern God's people do evil in the sight of the Lord, who then sells them into the hands of an oppressor. The people cry out to the Lord. He raises up a deliverer to bring peace to the land until the cycle starts again. The fourfold repetition of the phrase, "there was no king in Israel," indicates that what was needed was in fact the opposite, an earthly counterpart of Yahweh, sitting on the throne of Israel to restore divine order. The nation seemed determined to syncretize its worship of Yahweh with the cultic practice of the Canaanite storm god Baal, with ever increasing intensity. The book of Judges illuminates the great controversy theme as it traces the interplay between judges, people, Baal, and God. Recurring words and phrases, most notably the children of Israel again did evil on the side of the Lord, form the structure of the book, suggesting that a narrator skillfully wove the accounts together for the purpose of making a theological point, perhaps clarified by the book's chiastic structure, as you see on the screen. What we observe in the book is a progressive deterioration from better to weaker judges from the first. Othniel to the last Samson. The feelings of hope in the judges evident. One second. Okay. So we have a progressive deterioration from better to weaker judges from the first. Othniel to the last Samson. The feelings of hope in the judges evident early in the book deteriorate, and it becomes apparent that the judges themselves are part of the problem. Thus, any successful outcome of the great controversy will not be by them, but by divine intervention. The chiastic center of the book of Judges therefore climaxes with the Gideon narrative, which serves as a turning point for the book. So this one has a pivot. It has a 7, like in the picture of the original chiastic form I showed. Well, Othniel is idealized in his role as judge. Samson, by contrast, is depicted as a debauched, self-centered individual. Because Othniel is a descendant of Caleb, he is immediately perceived as a hero figure. Ehud is also described positively, but Barak is perceived as an impotent leader by his hesitation to follow the divine orders given through Deborah. By the time we come to Gideon, it becomes obvious that only God can resolve this controversy. A contrast may be seen between the early judges who focus on God's will and the last 3 judges who focus on their own gain. Divine messengers appear in the first half of the book, but ominously no longer after the report of Samson's birth. At the beginning, the focus is on what is good in God's eyes, but the latter judges only focus on what is good in their own eyes. Abimelech kills his brothers to become king. Jephthah lusts for power to rule over the inhabitants of Gilead, and Samson moves against the Philistines only in spiteful personal revenge. There are some disturbing parallels between the judges' narratives and some Genesis narratives that highlight the deteriorating status of the judges. The story of Jephthah sacrificing his daughter parallels Abraham sacrificing Isaac, but God does not provide a substitute for Jephthah's daughter. Similarly, when a crowd of men wants to break down the door of a house to rape its visitors, and the host offers his virgin daughters to pacify them, in Genesis 19, the crowd is blinded to prevent the crime from occurring. But in Judges 19, the men of Gibeah slake their lust without restraint. While it may be observed that the organic status of the judges deteriorates as the book progresses, it is important not to lose sight of the subtle character developments that reveal the way God orchestrates the outcome of the great controversy. Therefore, 3 judges are selected as examples to illuminate some of the trends in the book. In the Deborah narrative, God shows that he, not Baal, is Lord of the storm. In the Gideon narrative, the God who controls rain and dew and who is able to cancel the threats of a huge enemy encourages the reluctant judge. And the Samson narrative affirms that God works despite the impossible human material he has to work with. Deborah, let's look at Deborah here. The 3rd judge, Deborah, is remarkable for the confidence she inspires in the timid men around her. The heroes of this story are women, and the men are sidelined because of their timidity and lack of faith. Note the impossibilities in this story. A weak military leader facing overwhelming defeat, a woman leading a weak army into victory against a vastly superior enemy, and another woman killing the enemy commander in her own tent. The Deborah narrative is a classic example of the recurring sub-theme of the very existence of God's people being threatened by vast enemy armies and deliverance coming from someone who would be least likely to succeed in normal circumstances. The main character in the story of Deborah include Jabin, king of Canaan, Sisera, his army chief, and Deborah, who was both a prophetess and a judge, a very unusual degree of authority and influence for a woman of that time. Then there's Barak, whose name means lightning, and who has been identified as Deborah's husband. Introduced earlier as Lapidoth, which means torches. This touch of irony is not lost. With his lack of confidence, he is more like a line of handheld torches winding down a mountain trail than a bolt of lightning. Then there's the enigmatic Heber, who is from the line of Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. Although his forebears were very close aligned with the Israelites, Heber had forsaken those early loyalties and allied himself with the enemy. Apparently, it is Heber who warns the Canaanite king Jabin that Barak is rallying troops at Mount Tabor. So it is another ironic twist that the one to neutralize the Canaanite king's top general is Heber's wife, Jael. Her theophoric name, the Lord is God, shows which side of the controversy she is on. Deborah assures Barak that the battle will be God's. 2 verbs are used to describe how God would do this. He will draw, Sisera. The word draw suggests catching fish in a net, masak in the Hebrew, to the river Kishon, where he will give or deliver, Natan, him into Barak's hand. Deborah's song of thanksgiving after the battle in Judges 5 reveals how this was achieved. Sisera's chariots became bogged down in the narrow passes near the Kishon River because of heavy rain. The heavens and the clouds pour, Natop, and the mountains gush, Nizal, water, producing a flash flood that sweeps away many enemy soldiers. The rest try to escape on foot, including Sisera, but there's a total rout and God's people are delivered. The battle at the Kishon dramatically demonstrates that Yahweh, rather than Baal, is the true Lord of the storm. The storm that God unleashes decides the fate of the battle against the Canaanite storm god and the huge army of his followers, and facilitates victory at the hands of 2 women, the most unexpected of conquerors.